Alrighty, so today, not too much going on today. So I do have just a couple announcements for you to start off. Then we're going to talk about the last two lines of evidence for evolution, which is what we've been talking about. The last week, we've been talking about evolution and how it's just a change over time. And we're answering the question, how do we know what's happening? So we're going to kind of review what we've talked about so far and then talk about a couple of new things. And then at the end of it all, there's an Edpuzzle that kind of summarizes all four lines of evidence that supports evolution. So we're going to end with that. So my announcements on the next time that you come in, there will be a checkpoint quiz or a quick quiz. Nothing like the quiz I gave you for the genetics unit because that was large after a 9-week unit. So this is going to be more like a 10 to 15 point thing. Just making sure that you are understanding the lines of evidence that we've talked about in the last week or so in support of evolution. It's also going to be a work day because last week I gave you some assignments that took a large time in our class period, and some of us were able to finish it and some were not. So I would like to make sure that I give you that time to get it done before the deadline on Friday. So that's what Thursday will look like. And that will bring us into the weekend, and then you are on spring break. So you will not come back next week because you will be off, taking a break, sleeping in, doing whatever you want to do. And then I'll see you the week after next. So let's talk about what we've learned so far. So last week we did some activities with fossils and some with comparative anatomy. So we did Tuesday and Thursday. The first assignment that we did was the transitional fossils. So the picture here to your right. And with that, we learned that fossils are just remnants of older organisms. So something like their bones or whole bodies that have been preserved and we're able to kind of study them. And what we looked at with these fossils specifically were how they transition. So scientists hypothesize that tetrapods, which are organisms that have 4 limbs, evolved from things like fish, things that didn't have 4 limbs. They kind of swam. And these transitional fossils supported that idea because there were some fossils that shared characteristics with tetrapods and then also characteristics of fish, kind of had both. It was the in-between, if you will. So that's one way that we can see evidence for evolution. And the second one was comparative anatomy. So we looked at different structures of different organisms and saw how similar or how different they are. We talked about homologous structures like these down here in this picture. So we looked at the arm of a human, the leg of a cat, the flipper of a whale, and the bat of a wing. No, I said that backwards. A wing of a bat. And notice that structurally, they were very similar. They had the same bones. They had the humerus, the upper arm bone, the 2 lower arm bones, and all the hand and wrist bones, all that fun stuff. And they also had them organized in the same way, right? Same bones in the same way. So that definitely showed they were very close, very similar. And then we also learned about vestigial structures, which are one of my personal favorites, where there are structures or organs in certain animals that they don't really need anymore, but they needed to use them at some point. So one example was the whale with the pelvic bone. Remember, the pelvic bone helps your legs attach and help you walk. And very unusual for whales to need a pelvis, right? Because they don't have legs or anything, but suggests that millions of years ago, before they evolved to be so big and wonderful and water-based, they used to walk. So what all of these so far have hopefully shown us is that things have changed over time because we could see things in fossils, and comes along with the idea that things are related, that there is a common ancestor. So even though we look pretty different from things like whales, long, long time ago, we had a common ancestor that we just kind of like diverged from. And that's a big idea in evolution, is that everything is related. So we use what is called the tree of life to kind of show how everything is related. And up here is today, we have a beautiful array of plants and animals and fungi and bacteria and so many different types and species of each. But the idea is that if you go back far enough, like 4 billion years, you get to a common ancestor of all of us. And as time went on, we were given different competitions. We had different predators. We had to be in different places. And that's what made us change. And we'll learn more about that after spring break. But big thing is common ancestry. So things are pretty similar because we came from the same great grandparent, essentially. So today I want to talk about the last two. So we had fossils and anatomy. Today we're going to do embryological and molecular evidence. So I'm going to start with embryology. It's one of my favorites too. But before we talk about embryology, it's important to know just what an embryo is. So an embryo is defined as an unborn or unhatched offspring that's in the process of development. We usually think of humans because we are humans. So this is you 15, 16 plus years ago when you were in your mom's womb. It just shows how a fetus at 4 weeks develops into, a baby at 40, almost about to pop out. We're going to look at those. But with embryology, we don't just compare humans, we compare the embryos of different animals. So we compare them to see what similarities that they might have that might not show up after birth. Similar to anatomy, but looking at the embryo. So we're going to look at these 8 organisms: the fish, salamander, tortoise. Gosh, I forgot what that is. What is that? A chick, a hog, a calf, a rabbit, and a human. And we're going to kind of play a little game. I am going to show you an embryo very, very early on in development. And I want you to just guess. It doesn't have to be right. I just want you to guess which animal do you think it'll turn into. Ready? I'm excited. All right. What do you think that's going to become? A fish? Okay. Any other guesses? Just yell them out. Tortoise, seahorse. So we're looking at those 8 up there. Which one do you think it's going to become? I'm going to show you a middle one. Does that change your mind? What do you think it's going to become? Walrus? Well, we're looking at these 8. One of these 8. Fish or salamander. Someone said hog. Tortoise. Chick. This is going to blow your mind, I think, but it's a human. That's going to turn into a human. All right, I have more. Yes, we do look like that. Isn't that crazy? All right, let's do another one. How about this one? It's different. Huh? Tortoise? Tortoise? Chick? Okay, I'm going to go to the next one, see if it changes your mind. Any guesses? Chick? Got a lot of tortoise, got a lot of chick. It's a calf. It's a calf. Okay, another one. I think I have like 5 of these. Like I got carried away. All right, what about this one? You want to see the middle one? No. I hear tortoise again in here. I see chick. This is a chick. All right, I have, I think maybe 2 more. So I'll give you the middle one, too. Now that's a tortoise. Tortoise. Yeah, it is. All right, I think this is the last one. Might be the easiest one, too. What do you think this one is? I hear fish. Fish. Yeah, you guys are good. That's a fish. Nice. You guys kind of came to the conclusion that I was hoping. So in embryology, we compare embryos of different organisms. And what we've noticed is between the fish, salamander, tortoise, chick, hog, calf, rabbit, and human, if you look early on in development, they all look the same. Very, very close. And we all have similar characteristics when we're embryos. All of these have tails. So yes, even at some point you had an itty bitty tail. It went away though, obviously. And some people, it still stays. So there have been some babies that are born with full tails because some mutation didn't allow it to just stop growing. But usually it does. We also have these slits. They're called pharyngeal slits. In fish, it'll turn into gills, but in us, it turns into kind of like different muscles in our ear, jaw, and neck. And the biggest one is the backbone. So all of these organisms, the fish, tortoise, hog, human, all of them have one huge thing in common even after we're all born. We got a backbone. We are all grouped up in this group called vertebrates because we all have a backbone. So because we all have a backbone and we all look really, really similar as embryos, this supports the idea of evolution that all organisms that have a backbone have a common ancestor, okay? Because we all look identical as really, 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 really underdeveloped babies. All right, so the next one is not as fun, but still really cool. So then we have molecular evidence. So with molecular evidence, we're talking about like DNA and amino acid structure and proteins. So you have to remember when we talked about DNA, DNA has all of the information that your body needs and codes for like human, look like a human, look like a fish, look like a salamander. And to make the body, you need proteins to make all these characteristics. And of course, you have to remember that DNA turns into RNA, makes that copy. The RNA tells the amino acids to get in a certain order. And then those amino acids will make a protein. So we're looking at that. We can determine how closely related two organisms are by seeing how close their DNA sequences are. So, for example, there are scientists that literally will take a sample of a gene or a protein and write out or look up the order of bases, okay? So we can look at 3 different organisms and see which ones are more closely related. So I can compare A and B, sit down, look at each individual base, and see how many differences there are. So I already did that for you. So there are 3 differences between A and B. So there's one right here, one right here, one right here. So then if we're looking at B and C, we can do the same thing, compare these 2 strands, see how many differences there are. Here, there are 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the more differences they have, the more different they are. Kind of makes sense, right? So the less differences they have, the more similar they are, the more closely related they are. So we can take this kind of information and put it in a table as well. So I have 2 tables that I'm going to show you. So this one is protein analysis or amino acid sequencing. Very similar to looking at DNA, but just after it becomes amino acids. And these numbers represent the number of differences. And again, more differences is more different. So if we want to look at the human, we can compare the human to a carp, which is a fish, to a bullfrog, to an alligator, and to a mouse. So Looking at this, there are 24 differences in our our amino acid sequence between us and carp, 19 between us and bullfrog, 14 between us and alligator, 9 between us and mice, and 0 between us and other humans, which makes sense. But looking at that, you would say that we are more distantly related to fish. They're not really closely related to us at all. And then we are most closely related to mice, which makes sense because they're also mammals just like us, while fish are, well, fish. And then you could use that for anything else. If you want to see an alligator, alligators are more closely related to bullfrogs than they are fish, even though alligators are in water. You could also see it in this kind of way. So this is looking at a specific gene, cytochrome C. And the numbers are the number of differences in amino acids from these organisms and humans. So you'll see for this gene specifically, there are 0 differences between us and chimpanzees, which makes sense because we are at least molecularly most closely related to chimpanzees and bonobos. And then as you go down, we get more distantly related. So rhesus monkey, rabbit, cow, pigeon, and then yeast. We are definitely not like yeast. And that's how you'll read these. So again, the less differences, the more similarities, the more related that they are. Yeah. Are there any questions about molecular evidence? I told you it was not as fun as the embryos, but still pretty cool, I think. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and move on to Canvas and get us started on our assignment. Just kind of does the same thing. You'll look at embryos, you'll look at DNA sequences. It's only 5 questions, so you can get it done in like not very long. So for this, you'll go to modules and you'll go to today's date, March 22nd/23rd. And the first bullet point has the notes that I just went over in case you want to take a look at them again. The second bullet point is evidence for evolution, embryology, and molecular. And if you're going to do it virtually, you could just click on that and make a copy. I've made a lot of copies, so I'm just going to pull this up. All right, so I want to kind of explain how to answer each of these questions. There's only 5. But at the top, it says scientists use a variety of techniques to determine if species are closely related or not. So these techniques provide evidence for evolution. If 2 species are closely related, then they must have come from a common ancestor that evolved over time into 2 separate species. So number 1 is looking at the embryos. So on the right there, on the black background, are whale embryos. So you're going to look at the whale embryos and then compare them to these embryos down here. And I want you to tell me which one you think is most closely related to the whale. It does say circle your answer. I think that's for the hard copy. If you're doing it virtually, you could just type out your answer. I didn't give you a box. I don't know why. I guess I was just not thinking. But just kind of go down here. Tell me, do you think that whales, according to their embryos, are more like snakes, chickens, bats, or pigs? And then for number 2, it's just asking why. So when you looked at the embryos and were comparing them, what information that you gathered told you that whales are more related to that animal? For number 3, you're looking at DNA sequences. So we're looking at the sei whale, B. borealis, and this is the DNA sequence that we're looking at. So we're going to compare that sei whale to the minke whale, the fin whale, and the bird's whale. Sorry. So what you're going to do is highlight or circle each difference that you see. So you're always going to compare it to the gray box. So for example, if we're looking at the first codon, the sei whale is AAA, the minke whale is AAG. Right away, we see a difference, so I'm going to highlight the G. For the fin whale, AAG, again, comparing it to AAA, so I know G is different, and I'll highlight that. And the birds will AAA stays the same, so nothing changes. So you'll highlight each difference, and I mean like the letter difference, not the whole codon. Using that information, you answer questions 4 and 5. 4 asks which species of whale seems most closely related to the sei whale. So mink, fin, or birds, which one's more closely related? And number 5, why? What about the information you learned in the DNA sequence told you that this whale is most closely related? And that's it. Once you finish this, it's on Google, so just go to Submit Assignment and click Google Drive and then just find it. But the Ed puzzle is the last thing. Oops, I went back too far. So it's going to be on this page. And it's the last bullet point. It's summary of evidence of evolution. Ed puzzle. Now this Ed puzzle is a little longer than the Ed puzzles I usually like to give you. I don't normally try to give you 10-minute long videos. But again, it just summarizes all 4 of those lines of evidence a little bit more so you have a better understanding. So just like every Ed puzzle, click on your class period. It'll take you to your Ed puzzle. Do the questions. Take your time. And when you are done, just go to Submit Assignment. And a text box will pop up. And just tell me that you are done. Or if you want to spice it up, tell me a little quote, a joke. I don't know, a little meme. I'll take anything. But done is fine.